Tonight's SAG-AFTRA Foundation panel about editors on acting and feature films. I've been an editor for over 20 years on television shows like Beverly Hills 90210, Dawson's Creek, Switched at Birth, and Girlfriend's Guide to Divorce. I recently edited the indie film Cowboy Drifter. I've also written a book about film editing called Cutting It in Hollywood. This evening we will explore the integral relationship between acting and film editing with an incredible panel of feature film editors. For the film actor, the cast and crew are the first audience. Then the numerous takes of various angles of coverage for scenes are given to the editor to begin the process of sculpting and crafting the final performances of the actors that the audience in the theater will ultimately experience. Our esteemed panelists tonight have done this at the highest level on films that have entertained and enlightened filmgoers around the world. Please welcome John Axelrad, ACE, Maysie Hoy, ACE, Michael Jablow, ACE, and Carol Littleton, ACE. So we'll have everyone introduce themselves individually briefly, starting with you, John. Why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
It's alphabetical order, I guess. First of all, it's very strange that we, the editors, are now in front of the lights, because usually we're in a dark room, so I couldn't miss this, having actors watch us. But I've been editing for a long time now. I started off assisting when I left film school in 1990. I went to USC Film School and started assisting, and as you know, everything is digital now, and I learned the Avid editing system, which really propelled me from TV to features, and I've worked with some wonderful editors, including Ann V. Coates, who, as you know, some of you know, cut Lawrence of Arabia and Striptease. So she's a wonderful person, long career, and I really sought to follow in her footsteps and have an eclectic career like that. I've cut some TV and mostly features. This business loves to pigeonhole you, so I've kind of exclusively been doing features for a long time. Probably the one that you guys would know the most is Crazy Heart with Mr. Jeff Bridges, and it was quite funny because when we were making the film, the producers at the time, they had no idea that this was going to be something, a vehicle for Jeff, and it certainly was. Most recently, I edited The Immigrant and another film for James Gray, Lost City of Z, which comes out next year. And right now I am editing Papillon, the remake of the '73 film with Charlie Hunnam and Rami Malek. So that's it for me.
All right. Maysie, you want to tell the audience a little about yourself?
I'm a feature, well, I've been cutting features, and the last thing that I just did, and it was aired on the 30th of November, and it's having an encore airing, is the Dolly Parton movie of the week, Christmas of Many Colors. And I also edited the first one, which is Coat of Many Colors. My background, I come from acting, and I had a long history with Robert Altman, who I actually learned all about, you know, making movies with Bob. And prior to that, I had my own improvisational company. So with everything that I, you know, how I see acting has a little bent to it, you know. So right now, and also I've worked with Tyler Perry. In my 7.5 years that I worked with him, I cut 14 pictures. And what was great about working with him was he lived in Atlanta and I lived in LA, so I never saw him. And he would come out here maybe twice, 3 times at least, to look at the cut, give his final notes, and then we'd proceed to, you know, finish the movie. So basically, that's what I've been doing. I started out as an assistant, and when I was working with Altman, I worked in wardrobe, I worked in research, I was in on budget meetings, so, and, you know, working as a picture assistant, I went into sound, so I got a real education about making movies. And so that's what I carry with me every day.
Michael?
Hi. This is on? Okay. I have been a feature film editor for 31 years, and actually 34 years. And started as an assistant working with Milos Forman on Hair in the 70s. I am best known for my comedies such as Throw Mama from the Train, The Naked Gun, Old School, She's the Man, The Game Plan, but I have also cut a number of dramas. I cut Billy Crystal's HBO drama about the 61 home run race between Mickey Mantle and Roger Maris. I cut The Contender with Jeff Bridges and Joan Allen, for which they were both nominated for Oscars. And I bounced back and forth between television and features for a lot of years. And generally, the first thing that I do on the first day of shooting anything is go down to the set, meet the actors, and tell them that they should know that I'm their best friend. Because everything I do is totally devoted to making them look good. It's a very strange job being an editor in many ways, because I am more intimate with the actor than their lovers, their parents, their children. I know every time they blink and every small characteristic that they have and little vocal tics, and try to save them from their worst instincts many times.
Carol?
Well, I was not a child editor. I had no idea I was going to be doing what I'm doing now. I've been doing this for about 40 years, I guess, 35, 40 years. First of all, I thought I was going to be a college professor, but once I came to LA and hung around with film students, I realized they were having a lot more fun than I was. And I was dating a guy who's now my husband. His name's John Bailey. He's a cinematographer. And he was doing student films at USC. And I was sort of hanging out with all those guys, and they said, "Oh, hey, you, why don't you cater today?" Which meant going getting hamburgers. So that's sort of how I got into the film business. And initially, I really couldn't work in film because the unions were a closed shop here, if you know what that means. And unless there was a certain magical way that you could somehow get into the union, what they could call that nepotism, you were really on the outside. So I decided, well, I'll play this game my own way, and had a commercial company of my own, which was fairly successful for about 15 years, 10, 15 years. And during that time, I would bankroll my own projects for editing, little films for the AFI or anything that I could get my hands on to do by working in commercials. I would work on smaller films at night and on the weekends, and I just devoured it. I loved it. And just like Michael, I was the one thing that attracted me the most, I think, in staying in the business was what actors could do. I'm just in awe of what actors can do. I have absolutely no talent for it myself, so dealing vicariously through your performances has been the thrill of my life, I'd have to say. I just love it. And I've done all kinds of films, but primarily feature films, all different genre. I've worked a lot with a director named Lawrence Kasdan. The first film I did with him, which was his first film, was Body Heat. Then that was followed by The Big Chill and 9 others. The most recent thing that I did was a film for television on HBO called All the Way, meaning All the Way with LBJ. And in between, I've done literally very small films like Swimming to Cambodia, with Spolin Gray. I'm having a senior moment, excuse me. And I've done quite a few films with Demme, Jonathan Demme. I don't know. I did
E.T..
Yes, I worked on E.T. I edited E.T. And just a lot of films. I mean, each one of them is your favorite. It's like having your own child. You get to see it grow and over about a year's time, and it's a very, very exciting process, this thing we call film editing.
Okay, so we're going to do a question here that's sort of a two-part question that we'll go back through the panel one more time, and then after that we'll do questions to the entire panel. So this one will be for John, and then Maysie, Michael, and Carol, just like their introductions. So the question everyone wants to know, when you sit down to watch dailies for the first time, what is it that you look for in an actor's performance, and what criteria do you use when judging actors' performances? For example, why do you choose certain takes and line readings? What jumps out at you? What makes your heart skip a beat? John?
Well, it's a very loaded question because every actor will bring something different and new. And it's really, it's understanding the character. So I think when I approach it, I really want to get a good understanding with what the director is seeking. And I think Michael's idea of going down to the set and meeting everyone is very good. But I actually like to be hidden and not seen, kind of the invisible wizard. So when it comes to performance, I think James Gray, whom I work with a lot, has said something very interesting. He said that he likes to go for the interesting performance, not like the good performance, if you know what I mean. So really he's looking for something that stands out as unique, whether it be a line reading or facial expression. But it's really, I see the arc throughout the film. The first day of shooting may be a little bit tricky for the actors to get into the rhythm of the characters and stuff like that. But I'm really looking to channel beyond the actor and get into the character. So I do tend to look a lot for nuance and facial movement, not so much the spoken word. In terms of choosing what take is better than the others, I mean, a lot goes into it. I'll watch dailies and mark performances that I think are very workable. Some actors are very method, and they'll give you a whole range of performances, but you know, then you just have to label and mentally remember, okay, well, this, I have this if I need this, but this is the direction I think the actor's arc should be going for that character. And then really it comes down to some of the things we'll get into later, because sometimes I find a great performance, but because the blocking is not consistent, it's not continuity, but if the blocking is all off, it's very hard to use sometimes an actor's really good performance, and you have to go with another take. But that's for a later question.
Story for later. Okay, same question, Maysie, in terms of looking at dailies, what do you look for in actors' performances? What was your thought process choosing takes and things of that nature?
When I look at, the first time I look at dailies, it's when I'm watching the performance, it's how I feel. You know, if it gets me here, then I know that's the take I'm going to use. And so I think that what I look for in, you know, in an actor is for them to tell me the truth, because the camera never lies. So if you're acting and you're in the character and you're telling me the truth and you're truthful about that character, it'll come through. And if you're not, right away I can tell something, you know, is off, and it's usually in the eyes that I'm looking for. And also, like John mentioned, you know, nuances. I think a performance that sort of gives me like that's unpredictable. Not so unpredictable that it's kind of a crazy performance, but, you know, something that's spontaneous. So I'm always looking for stuff that's spontaneous. And a lot of times, like the happy accidents that happen are like the best takes. So when an actor's really relaxed. And so a lot of times, you know, if I'm looking for something like a look or a look that the actor didn't give me within the take, I'd go before, you know, they're rolling the cameras, and I'm looking for something before they slate it, and afterwards when they say cut. So I know a lot of us do that, and you'd be surprised at, you know, what you can find. A case in point was when I was working on What Dreams May Come. So Max von Sydow is in the sea of faces. Anyways, the boat capsizes, and now I need a connection from they're in the boat, and then the next shot is the ship's graveyard. Now, how do I connect that? I can't go from the boat, you know, capsizing to that. It makes no sense. I mean, it'd be jarring. And so I kept looking and looking for a shot of Max looking up. I go, it's got to be here. I know it's got to be here. So when Vincent said cut, he looked up. That was it. You know, I slowed it down. So I slowed it down to like 50%, and it worked perfectly. So, you know, those are the things that I'm looking for, and also the arc of the character. You know, sometimes, you know, because things are shot out of sequential order, your character might not have learned that lesson yet, might not have grown yet. So that's what we're looking for, I'm looking for. And another case in point is when I was doing the Joy Luck Club, the woman that was married to the really cheap husband. So, you know, he came up and he said to her girls, you know, Lena, when you buy charcoal, you gotta buy lighter fluid. And she kind of looked at him, and she had two takes. One, immediately she went to the cupboard to get the lighter fluid and give it to him. But that didn't feel right because she hadn't learned the lesson yet about how to be strong. And so there was a pause, kind of like that kind of battered woman vibe. And so I went with that take because she stopped, kind of nervous, reached for the thing, and then stopped once again to give him, you know, the lighter fluid. But it's all that kind of thing that we're sort of the keeper of the story too. So we have to know the script so well. I mean, sometimes better than the director, maybe not as well as the writer, but knowing when all those little bits add up to the final performance. And a lot of times, what I feel is that, you know, you leave a movie theater and you go, there's something wrong with that performance. And then you find out that, well, little gestures, you know, that may be real subliminal, but your brain, you know, registers that. And so at the end you go, well, I don't quite get it. How did that character become this, or why did he decide to do that? So those are the things that, you know, that I look for.
All right, Michael?
I also, the first thing I'm looking for is actors who are in the moment and who have a certain amount of truth in their performance. I'm also looking for actors who never leave the scene, because a lot of times now we're shooting 2 cameras, and I find people's reactions more fascinating often than people when they're talking. I once, just for the hell of it, I once cut a scene in a movie called Little Big League where there are 4 people sitting around a table, and there is not one line that is on screen. It's and I just was totally into people reacting, and you know, and it doesn't even matter sometime whether it's a movie star or not, because I did The Last Castle with Robert Redford and James Gandolfini, and 25 years earlier I had done Brubaker as an associate editor with Redford, and Redford is a big movie star. But when we were doing The Last Castle, if he wasn't saying his line, he was like mentally back in his trailer or in Sundance or someplace, because he gave me nothing. And the director had him actually come into the editing room and look at some of the scenes that I'd cut, and they were all playing off of Gandolfini, who was just one of the most phenomenal actors I ever worked with. And Redford went and complained to the director that I wasn't cutting to him enough. I mean, imagine that, an actor with an ego. But the next day, his performance was an awful lot better. You know, it is, when I'm interviewed for a job, I always say, for me, the first thing is the performance. You know, that's what I'm looking for. And nobody, when you tell somebody at a movie, the first thing they ask isn't who's the editor, they ask who's in it. And everybody does that, including the editors. They all want to, you know, you're going to see the actors. If you have a performance that is gripping, that is real, it stays with you for a long time, you know. And so in that process, I'm serving the film and serving the performance of the actor. There are times when I've worked with actors who are all over the place sometime. I once did a miniseries with Leslie Ann Warren, and she was playing a character that was having a nervous breakdown. It was called Family of Spies, about the John Walker spy scandal, where this guy who worked for who was in the Navy recruited his entire family to sell secrets to the Soviets. And she was just so erratic, the director did 10 takes on her. But I managed to create an entire performance using lines from different takes. It was not something that she had done all in one piece, but she won an Emmy for it. And as far as I'm concerned, there's no greater tribute, you know, to editing than the fact that that happens. You know, the thing about being an actor in a movie is that you have very little control about what finally happens to your performance. And so you have to sort of compensate for that. I mean, I love getting different line readings. I love finding entirely different takes on performance. Again, as Maysie was saying, the spontaneity. When I was doing The Contender, there was one scene in which Jeff Bridges is the president and Sam Elliott and Joan are in his office. And there's just been some other filthy revelation about her, you know, by Gary Oldman, who's trying to destroy her. And Jeff, on one take, literally started pacing around the room, threw his hands up in the air and screamed at the ceiling. And I just knew the minute I saw that performance it was going in. And it went in my first cut, and it's still in the movie.
Okay, Carol.
Well, I would have to say ditto to pretty much what the other editors here have said. That we are definitely the guardians of your performance, in the sense that we are there to not only protect what you have done, but to enrich it and to hopefully make it as believable and as emotional as possible. So when I'm looking at dailies, I am looking for those values. I'm looking for things that affect me, because I'm the first audience, essentially. That in the case of directors with whom I've worked a great deal, I kind of know what their taste is. For instance, I know Larry Kasdan's taste very much. And so I'm aware of the things that he would respond to, but also aware of the nuggets and things that I find, he calls them nuggets, that I find in the dailies, that I know that I can work into the scene or into the performance, and they will have perhaps an edge, or perhaps they will have a moment of sensuality or sexuality. And I would talk, for instance, about one scene that we had in Body Heat, which was the moment that the Bill Hurt character decided that he's going to kill Kathleen Turner's husband. And it's obviously a very big moment. And the moment, she's manipulating him the whole time, and at the very moment that he, and it was in one take, the moment that he says, we're going to kill him, he takes a whiff of her hair, smells her hair, and says, we're going to kill him. It was just stunning, only in one take. But that one take was golden. You only need it once. You're only going to use it once. So it was really very, very noir, very much a film noir moment. It happened just before there was a massive pullback of the camera to show them alone in the middle of the room in darkness. We are evaluating a lot of different things, a lot of different emotions when we look at dailies. And I look at dailies very carefully and take a lot of notes. And what's wonderful about digital editing is that we can put a little marker on the things that we like. So it lives there as a kind of a little reminder of things that we might like to use. And I'll just reiterate one of the things that Maysie said is that I'm very keenly aware of where the actor is emotionally in the scene, in the sequence, and in the film. So I don't want the audience, I don't want the character to be ahead of the audience, behind the audience. It's got to have an emotional life that is believable. I'm always looking at that. And that leads me to another thing that I do in dailies, is that I will put a scene together, put it aside, come back to the next day, refine it, and then put it aside until I have other scenes that go around it to make sure that I am mining, literally mining, taking out the veins of a performance that will build and build and build. You have to constantly be re-examining that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's pretty much what I do when I'm watching dailies.
Those are great answers. The rest of the questions will be to the entire panel for whomever wishes to answer. Ideally, multiple panelists will weigh in. So the next question is, in your opinion, what is the strongest connection between the actors and the editors, for whoever would like to respond?
I mean, it's kind of the director. It's, I don't know if that's the answer you were looking for, but based on what my fellow panelists have been talking about, we as editors and the director need to really think about the whole story, where we want to go. And the role of an actor, I think, is to also really understand that character arc. And I mean, the worst thing about filmmaking, about production, is shooting out of order and not really knowing, especially if you're shooting the end of a movie. And in Papillon, which I'm doing now, we shot some scenes at the very end of the movie first. And it's very difficult for an actor to see the big picture, very difficult for a director and an editor to really know where it's going. But when I'm looking at takes, I'm just looking for that arc, the character arc, and the truth in performance. You see it in the eyes, you see it in nuance, and so it's believability. I mean, this is pretty much what we've all been talking about. It's finding those genuine moments, and many actors, it takes several takes. I know some editors, they go backwards. They look at like take 8 first and then go back, and which I think is wise, because sometimes it does take a while for the rhythm to sink in, and especially if you're working with new actors in certain scenes, you're feeding off of each other. So I'm totally going off target from your question. I don't even remember what it was.
No, interestingly, for myself, when I watch dailies, especially on TV shows, I feel like I know these people as different people. Yeah. And then I actually get the opportunity to meet them as the real person, and it's interesting to see the two. It's almost like a hologram. I look and they're, well, you're real. You're not just on the screen.
And that's happened, yeah.
Has that happened to you? Anyone else, where you meet the actor for the first time and you're not just a character, you're a real person?
Yeah, what's really amazing is that we see them every day, right. Every day, day in and day out. So first time that I may meet an actor, I don't like it this way, but sometimes we're working in LA, and the only time we meet them is when we have an ADR session. And I walk in like I've known them forever, and they say, "Who are you?"
That actually happened to me. I worked with Elizabeth Banks, and I just felt I knew her so well. And I happened to see her at some facility, and I said, "Elizabeth!" And she looked at me like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, right, yes. You would not know who I am, but I know who you are very well."
But Jonathan, I have to agree with you that the director's the go-between, because many times, you'll get the director calling the cutting room and ask you to tell them, okay, they'll say, "So what do you think of that performance?" Or "What do you think, do you like what that person's doing?" And then you have to tell them the truth. What was really interesting was I did one of the Tyler Perry movies, and I was watching the dailies, and I go, this actor stutters. I called them up. I go, "Do you realize your actor stutters?" "Oh, really? Well, he wasn't in the reading." I go, "Well, there are a lot of there are people that stutter. If they know the lines, they're not going to stutter. But once he got off script, he would stutter." And so I said to Tyler, I said, "Do you want me to cut it like he's uncomfortable and he can't find his words, he's kind of stuttering?" And he goes, "No, I don't want him to stutter." So now I have to cut every line, every word that he stutters in. And that's why that's one performance and one actor I can't watch anymore, because to me, the whole scene butchered. Because, now you're forcing me to cut because you're stuttering, and it really pissed me off. And so that's what's interesting. Oh, and also focus, okay? So the DP is out there, they're shooting like crazy and they're moving real fast. Then you get the phone call from the director. "Okay, on my little iPad, I see things are out of focus. So tell me, what is in focus?" And you go, because if you tell them, somebody's job's on the line. But at the end of the day, if you don't, and they look at the final cut and they go, "Okay, what about take two?" "Yeah, that's out of focus too." And so I had that kind of phone call on my birthday. I'm having dinner, and I get this phone call from Tyler, and he's just irate. He goes, "Well, that one shot where we're dollying with Jennifer, and she goes to the window, the focus is soft. What's the other take like?" I go, "Out of focus." And he said, "So why didn't anybody tell me it was out of focus?" And I said, "Well, we get the daily reports. The producers get the reports." I said, "Your producers know that it's out of focus, but for some reason, they don't want to tell you." So that's our job. Not only are we protecting the actors, we're protecting the DP. So the other thing that really bothers me is that when a movie is really good and the editing is seamless and it's invisible, somehow the DP did that. Right? How many of that? It's like, "Oh, the wonderful panning and the seamless editing." I go, "He didn't do that. In fact, I got the best take." And so when you're in the DI and they go, you always get this one DP that'll always look at you and go, "Was that the best take?"
We always use the worst ones.
We always use the worst one.
Unless you slip an envelope with large bills under the door.
So anyways, that's, our job is also to be diplomatic, because you're writing that fine line with the director, the producer, and then sometimes you might get one of these actors that come into your cutting room and then they have a few things to say. I've been lucky that that's not happened. Michael.
Well, as I say, I had Redford come into my editing room and have a few things to say. But this is very true. Also, it's like I had the tremendous pleasure of having worked with both Michael Caine and Jack Lemmon in my career. And both of them are such fine technicians. I mean, there's a whole side of acting which has to do with being real, with saying the line reading. But if you have the cup in one hand in one take and the cup in another hand in the other take, and you've got great line readings in this one for that and this one for that, you're limiting what material can go in. And both of those actors, Jack and Michael Caine used to brag that he never blinked unless he on camera unless he decided to, because it made a very specific point. And Lemon I had the pleasure of doing a film with him at the AFI when I was starting out in the business in 1973, and I was the assistant cameraman as well as the editor, so I was standing in front of him and doing the slate. And one thing he did every single take, he would look down when I did the slate, he would look up and look straight into the camera and say, "Magic time." And it was a kind of self-hypnosis, because he would literally, he could craft his performance, he could tweak his performance, control his line readings, but literally if he had a cup in his hand, he lifted it up and put it down on the same syllable in every take. And that kind of thing makes it really easy to use the best takes. I mean, a lot of actors think that the only thing that what they're feeling when they're giving a take is what's really important. And the fact is that, and I've seen a million actors blow a line and stop in the middle of a take and then go back to that line and just say that line again in some way that's satisfying to them. And it's the worst thing in the world, because they can't judge. First of all, if you're ever stopping in the middle of a take, go back 3 or 4 lines and pick it up, because there's a rhythm to the performance. And I might not want to cut, I don't want to cut on every line, bouncing them back and forth like a ping pong ball, line on camera. There are always places, if somebody's giving an interesting performance, that I'm going to want to sit on them. And also, you can't judge what the camera is seeing. You may be feeling that you're giving a really lousy performance, and I've seen this happen before. You know, I saw Emmett Walsh once do a 2.5-minute scene that was breathtaking when I saw it in dailies. The director yelled, "Cut." He looked up into the camera and said, "You know, that was dog shit." And, you know, it's just like you cannot judge what's going on there. That's why there's a director, you know. And even if you blow a line in the middle of a take, unless the director says cut or says go back and pick it up, keep going, because it's the best way to ruin a good performance sometime. If you're in the groove, you know, bobbling a line is not always the worst thing in the world. When I worked with Rod Lurie on The Contender, he loved people to bobble lines because he said it was real. And it's impossible to judge yourself when you're there in that moment. You have to trust the director and trust that he's got, you know, your best interests in his hand and the best interests of the picture. And if he wants to cut, he'll cut you. He'll cut. But if not, it's really important to just trust everything and keep going.
I lost track of the question.
Okay. Oh, we were just talking about the actors' connection, but we pretty much covered it. Maybe Carol, go ahead and take this. What do actors sometimes do that makes them difficult to cut?
Well, I think that Michael just
That's a
touched
good-
on
good follow-up then.
one of the main things is that if you feel that your performance is not the best in the world and you'd like to try it again, don't edit yourself out. Finish the take that you're on and do it on the next take. Ask the director for another take. I mean, most directors, if you ask them for another take, they'll say, sure, yeah, why? Yeah, do it, let's go. because every time that you stop, we have to cut. And if you make a comment, oh, that was terrible, let's take it over again, we have to cut that out too, you know. And anytime that you interrupt your train of thought and you interrupt your being in the moment, it's very difficult to get that back. And I can see an actor lose it again and again and again. It's not just a question of being mechanically, what can I say, hitting the marks and knowing your lines. It's being in character. And every time that you go out of that, we have to cut out of it. You know, if you become yourself in the scene, that's not going to be any good. And every time you say, oh my God, that's terrible, oh, I have to go back, that's you, that's not the character, if you see what I mean. So I think the thing that would be the most helpful for us is for you, even if you think you're going up and you can't remember and everything, just keep going. Just keep going. There will be something there because it's real. It's the other thing, I'm really drawn to films that are not totally full of dialogue. It makes me think of La Dolce Vita, for instance, where Mastroianni has practically no dialogue, but you know exactly what he's doing, how he's feeling all the way through. It's absolutely mesmerizing to watch him. American films, for the most part, feel that if something's being said, you have to show it, show the actor saying it. And I'm always battling that. I'm always trying to find the way the other actor in the scene is reacting, as opposed to simply going from line to line to line to line. I may put a first cut together that way, but that's just for my own information. I would never, hopefully never, leave a scene like that. But I think the power of the character, the power of the emotion, you need to trust it as much as you would trust the lines, because they tell equally well. Silences, being in a scene and being totally involved in the scene silently is every bit as important as hitting your marks and saying your lines. And I think that's what I treasure the most in the truly stellar performances that I have been privileged to work on. And I could take any number of performances that I find just extraordinary. For instance, Kevin Kline is just a master technician. And yet he will give you a range of performance that is just absolutely remarkable. How did he do that? The same thing with Meryl Streep. She's not so concerned about every word being exactly right, but she is extremely concerned with being in the truthfulness of the moment, of having a wide range of things that she would like to try. She's very, very, very inventive. So I don't know if that's answering your question, but those are the things that I would offer as ways of approaching her work.
Years ago, I was watching Johnny Carson, and he had Shelley Winters on, right? So he asked Shelley, so what advice do you give to young actors? And she said, think loudly. And that goes to what Carol was saying, you know, a lot of times I don't like dialogue, and there are some actors that aren't really good at giving line readings. And so what I do is I eliminate all their lines, and then they don't say anything. So they're reacting, right? Because it goes back to, you know, let the words show the emotion. So you don't have to work real hard at feeling sad. If the lines are sad, it's already conveying to us, that's the audience, what the emotion is supposed to be.
I think one thing, and I'm just going to do a lot of repeating of what my fellow panelists have said, but I think one thing that's very important when you're in a scene is to be a team player with your other actors, because you're on all the time. So it may not be your close-up, but again, we look for those reactions, as Michael talked about. We look for the nuances and wordless expressions. And you're also helping your fellow actor with their performance. But just be aware that even if the camera is not on you, if it's over your shoulder, I mean, what you're doing affects what we do, affects what we can cut to. One of my biggest pet peeves, and I mean only a few actors have done this to me, but when it comes time for their close-up, I notice that they slow down their delivery because they want to be on screen longer. Okay, now in terms of being a technician, I mean, you guys, you know, you're free to explore your performance and try different things, try different takes, even try different rhythms and timings. But as Michael and Carol touched on, I mean, being a technician is what will maximize your coverage in terms of what we can use of you. And that, you know, it's not just small continuity things, but it's blocking. It's, you know, if you're supposed to turn on a light switch and say a line, then pick up a phone and say a line, okay, in the next take, don't turn on the light switch, pick up the phone, and then say your line. Or don't, in the third take, say your lines, and then pick up the phone, turn the light switch. I mean, it's, you think you're doing giving us variety, but what it's doing is we're saying, well, okay, in the coverage, it's all like this, and I can't have the light switch being turned on 3 times. So you eliminate takes that might otherwise be really good performance-wise. So, you know, being a technician is, I think, part of an actor's job, and you will only help yourself by being consistent. And that also goes for rhythm and timing. So don't slow down or change your delivery if it just happens to be your close-up.
That takes us to our next question, which is, what can actors do to help them get more screen time and not end up on the cutting room floor, besides slowing down line deliveries and close-ups? Anyone want to take that?
One. First of all, I don't think that I've ever thought of giving an actor more screen time. I mean, that's never been my intent in any film. And any time I've been cutting, it's, oh God, that person doesn't have enough screen time. I better give him more screen time. It's just simply not, you know, with all due respect to the question, that's not what we're doing. We're making a movie, and there are lots of moving parts, and there are many, many pieces to the puzzle, and acting is really only one of them, excuse me. But it is really only one part of the film. And the quicker that you understand that, the less that you will agonize over it. It's not screen time. There are no small parts. That's been said a jillion times. It's absolutely true. Absolutely true. I have worked on films where there's an actor who has an electric role. Very, very little screen time, and yet it's absolutely indelible. Absolutely indelible. So it's not the amount of seconds on a stopwatch that you're going to be, that your mug's going to be up on the screen. It's what you do with it, the screen time you have. Look at Giant, which I just saw the re-release of it, oh, I don't know, a couple of months ago. James Dean as Jet Rink has actually very little screen time, and yet we all remember his performance. It's extraordinary. He reinvented the book of acting when he did that, you know, that crazy scene where he, there's the gusher, the oil well. So don't worry about screen time. I just find that, I'm sorry, but I find that question to be somehow totally inappropriate.
Okay. Does anyone else want to weigh in, or no?
And also, none of us have any control over it. The best way not to get cut from a movie is to have a major role which is essential to the plot.
You'll stay in it for sure.
You'll stay in for sure if you're an extra, if you've even got a small scene. I've known Danny DeVito for a long time, and he once told me a story that he had a much bigger part in Car Wash originally, and he's been friends with Jack Nicholson ever since Cuckoo's Nest, and he went to Jack and said, Jack, they cut my whole part, I'm not even in the movie anymore. And Jack said, Danny, what they don't see can hurt you.
And to follow up on that, I mean, if you ever find yourself completely cut out of a movie, it's not necessarily you. It's, as Carol said, I mean, we are crafting a story. And I worked on this movie, Two Lovers, with Joaquin Phoenix and Gwyneth Paltrow, and the director, as directors do, overwrote the script. And there was a whole side story with characters, and everything was great about that. But when the film came together, it was very clear it just didn't fit, and that side story needed to be removed. And this actor was completely removed from the film. Now, the problem was the director never told this actor this, and the actor went to the premiere. So that is on the director. That was not a good thing to do. But I mean, yes, as Michael said, I mean, you have to be pertinent to the plot. And the flip side is true. I mean, there are actors that I desperately wanted to cut from a film that you can't because it's essential to the story. So, you know, really, it's just give it
Can I
your
add
all.
something there?
What?
Could I add a comment?
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
I think the one that people asked me the most about it was, why did you cut Kevin Costner out of The Big Chill? And it was precisely that reason. He was perfectly fine. His performance was wonderful. In fact, he's still in the movie. That's his corpse in the beginning. He's being dressed by the Undertaker, who has red fingernails, which I love. But there was a flashback where Kevin Costner was the age that he was in the film at the time, and all the other actors were the age that they were in the film, and it seemed a bit like a costume party of the 60s, 1969. That was one problem. The other problem was that the film really had much more meaning if we did not know specifically who Alex was. Then everyone could relate to people in their lives who never made it for one reason or another. So it was just an emotional choice more than anything. It just had to do with what was the best way to tell the story. I think that we made it up to Kevin on the next movie, Silverado, where he had a starring role and he was fantastic.
So the other thing, adding to what you're saying, Carol, is there's a big difference in timing when you're doing a feature. Okay, so the movie works at 101 minutes. It's great. But my two experiences working on the Dolly Parton movie of the week is it's 84 minutes and 24 seconds. Not 25 seconds, 23 seconds, it's okay. So there's this little minor character that's in the story. We had to lose that whole story just because we had to get it down to 84:25. So that's the big difference. 84:24? 24. Can't be 25.
Depends on what network it is.
Well, NBC has this crazy calculation. Anyways, so as an editor, you know, when we finished the movie, when it was locked, it was 84:20. So we're going, oh, this is great. So then when we had to do the whole calculation, we became 84:27. So now I had to go back in, and now you're trimming to fit the time. So it's also, you know, different media where you, or you can always ask, see, that's where you make friends with the editor. Can I have that scene for my reel?
So we've already talked a little about continuity. We've touched on that, so I'll move on past that question. Does anyone have examples of performances that were nurtured and protected in editing? For example, you saw something in a performance in Dailies that the writer, director, or producers didn't initially appreciate until it was cut together. For example, someone was not as high on an actor or a performance until they saw a scene and were blown away by it. Has that ever happened to anyone here?
One time I had to, word for word, cut and replace dialogue for a certain actor who the director thought was a big problem and uncuttable. And revoicing, can actually, I think, do a lot. One TV movie I cut early in my career, they were very unhappy with an actor's performance, and per SAG rules, they gave her a shot to revoice many scenes, and she nailed it. So that's just one example.
I worked with an athlete who was very wooden in his performance, and I think it was like one of his second big part. And what I found interesting was when he was in front of the camera, he stiffened up. So when he was off camera, he was very natural. And his cadence was exactly the same on camera as when he was off camera. So what I did was I stole all the lines he did off stage and stuck it in his mouth when he was on camera. So now now his performance, even though he was a little wooden, it was a little more natural. So these are things that we do, to protect the actor, because if you guys look bad, then we look bad. I mean, we're the first to get fired off a show if it's not working. I mean, the director gets to stay. He could be a terrible director, but we're trying to do the best we can, save his ass. But that's, every day we're faced with, I think it's more like problem solving. It's like a piece of puzzle. And I've, driven to work on some days thinking, oh, wow, this scene's going to be really easy, because I saw the dailies, it looked pretty simple, and then I go in and cut it, it's like a nightmare for all these reasons we were talking about. The simple scenes, right.
I think one of the things that is most difficult is to give, what could I say, the understated scene, the scene that seems to be the simplest is many times the most difficult. And I think that's one of the things that I would caution you about when you're working, is that the go-to attitude many times for first-time actors is to go to one of confrontation or open, heated emotion. And the actors who have been around for a long time understand what needs to be modulated in a scene. That you don't start at the height of the emotional moment in moment one, you work towards it. Or sometimes you can work conversely. You have a burst and then it's sort of an unraveling of the scene. But you never keep the emotional moment the same all the way through, because then you've got nowhere to go. So when you're analyzing where the emotional life is of your character, you need to think very carefully about how you're going to achieve it and how you're going to preserve the intent of the scene. Now, the director will and should help you, but sometimes they just don't know quite what to say. They say, well, why don't you just do it again, this time maybe a little slower, next time a little quicker, next time with a little more feeling. And yet there are some directors who will give you a note that will absolutely solidify precisely what he wants. So you really need to examine the scenes not only for all these mechanical things that we're talking about, but your progression in the scene. It's very, very important. Those scenes are, to my mind, the most captivating. When an actor really takes you through bit by bit and you're with them moment to moment to moment. And if that is in the dailies, it's better for us not to cut anything, because you're doing all the work. I would much rather have the actor do the work than for me to do the work. I'd have to say that I have done several performances where every day it was like pulling teeth. And finally what I had to do in these, I won't name them, but actors who just would lose their place all the time. So finally what I did, I would take the very best of that particular performance, put them together, and every time I had to cut away, I would cut to the other actors in the scene. Mm-hmm. It's a dreadful way. It's so unfair to the other people, because you're trying to salvage one performance and you're savaging two others in it's just, it's Sophie's Choice. I mean, it's horrible. It's very, very, I don't mean the movie Sophie's Choice, I mean the idea of killing your own baby. I think that's one of the most difficult things to do, when one actor complicates the life for everybody.
Well, that goes, when you're talking about emotions, right? Like a lot of actors love to cry on screen. I mean, they're just wailing away. And so then when they come in, I had an instance where this actress came in and we had to do some ADR lines in this one scene where she was really crying, right? Well, she came in and she goes, oh, I want to see that scene where I was really crying. And I'm going, no. Well, why isn't it in there? And then, blame it on the director. And so I told them, I said, well, because Tyler didn't think it fit. And if you want to talk to him about that scene, you can go right ahead and call him. But the emotion of crying, when you're in a scene, watching an emotional scene, I don't get emotional when I see the actors crying. It's all that holding back. That's when you start welding up. And so, and also, when actors look at a script, I'm sure they don't look at they don't read the script. They just go to, their character, how many pages of lines, and, oh, this is so great, I have a 1.5-page dialogue scene. Well, when we look at it, I'm thinking, okay, where am I going to cut out of this? Can't have like a 1.5-minute dialogue scene. Does it make any sense? So, these are things, I mean, there's a lot to think about, but the important thing is to, hone your craft so that when it comes time for you to step up to the plate, you're hitting it out of the park. So it's all about preparation, and studying, other actors. And I'm going to jump to the end because I think that it's really advantageous if you ever get the chance to get invited into an editor's room, you should do it. Forget about how you look and, oh, I can't do it because I hate seeing myself. Well, you have to, because you might have a weird tic that you don't know about and that we have to cut out. Or, it's all that stuff that you'll learn by watching your own work and other actors, I mean, when I was working with Robert Altman, it was mandatory for all the actors to come and watch dailies. If you didn't show up as an actor, you're out. I mean, he wouldn't talk to you for the rest of the show because he felt you were egotistical. You're not part of the company. You're not you're not a team player. So if you ever get a chance to do that, I know there's some directors that don't want, actors to look at their work, but if you get a chance, I highly suggest it.
All right, looks like we have some questions from our audience here. This is for everyone. It's kind of a broad question. In your years and years of experience, have you seen a change in the quality of performances from actors as we head in the millennial generation? Is it getting better or worse? If yes, what do you think is causing this change? Who might I ask came up with that question? Nobody?
No one's
Okay.
going to admit to it. No.
No, it's a very
good question. I mean, I must say that I'm finding that the technicians of the technical side of acting has really kind of fallen on the wayside, at least in my experience. I don't have as much experience as my fellow panelists, but when I'm working with older actors, David Morse is fantastic, and I did a TV show with Andre Braugher and David Morse, and these guys, they were just so on point. It was like second nature to them. He picked up the coffee cup on the line, he always put it down on the same line, and but still within the takes, he gave me such a range of performance and a range of emotion. And to touch on what Carol and Maysie were just talking about, subtext, that's the word. It's like, when you're really kind of in the zone and you don't have to worry about, should I be acting big or crying, and I do think that a lot of the younger actors think bigness is what is good, and it's not about bigness. It's about, as Carol said, the restraint. Not, you want to cry, but you're not crying, and it's playing the subtext of a scene as opposed to what the page says. Anger and sadness, all the emotions can be done in very interesting ways, and that's goes back to what James Gray, my director, said, is that he's always looking for the interesting performance that really is not something that you would expect. But to answer your question, I do think that there's a little less discipline. At least I'm seeing more of that with younger actors.
I think part of it is due to 3-camera television, too. That when you're shooting a 3-camera show, it's like doing a stage play. You've got 3 cameras, and you don't have to be the same from one scene to another. You never have to match. It's also a problem I think a lot of the directors have gotten into their heads right now, that since we're digital and they no longer have a 10-minute load in the camera, that they can simply back up scenes and pick up line readings. And a great deal of the discipline of acting. I don't think that that actors of the millennial generation are any worse, but I don't think that they have really learned the rigorous habits that a lot of earlier actors had to learn. And the thing about acting for film is that it is so intimate. I was saying at the beginning that I know all the way my actors breathe, the way they walk. And a very small thing can have a tremendous emotional consequence and show up tremendously emotionally. It's not, the big thing is not always the thing. I very often I've had actors, especially in comedic parts, where they think if they're going completely bonkers in a scene and chewing up the entire scenery, literally, and dumping over tables. I once had an actor come at me and say, "Why didn't you use the take where I dumped the table?" And I said, "Oh, I told him the producer didn't like it." And all I know is it never went into any cut. I saw it and it's like, whoa, that's just too big.
I think one of the problems, but it really is the digital technology. Maysie was saying about dailies. That used to be a tool for all of us to examine our work, including the actors. I mean, everybody, from the dolly grip to the cinematographer, everyone could use that time every day, and there was an evolution over the film. Now that we do not look at dailies together, people look at it on their iPads or whatever, I swear I'm the only person who's looking at all the dailies. I know I'm the only person looking at all the dailies, because I can see who logs on to see the dailies. So people will look at dailies and they'll see them, you can see that they logged on for maybe 10 minutes. That means they're just touching takes. I log on for 5 hours or whatever it takes to take a look at dailies these days, because they never cut the camera. They just keep going and going and going. So when does a director give a note? When do you refine the blocking? When do you actually give a thought about a performance? If you're just shooting and shooting and shooting as if everything is equally as good. I don't think it has anything to do with millennials. I think it has to do with the lack of discipline, as you say, of actually putting a film together in a thoughtful, examined way.
Okay, here's another question from someone who may or may not have been cut out of a project. In the event that we have, in fact, been cut out of something, no one up here has ever done that, I'm sure. Is it a ridiculous request to obtain the footage? If not, how would you suggest we go about making that request? Thanks. That's from Zoe.
Hi. Well, I mean, I've had that experience before. We had to, as the big example I mentioned, that didn't end too well since that person was never notified. But in other cases, small parts, yeah. I mean, the actor, actress would come to me and ask, but it always has to go through the producer. And usually the producer is very amenable to doing that. Sometimes they say, well, you got to wait till the film has released. You know, there's all these rights issues about, you know, distributing the media. But I mean, that's an excellent time to ask if you're not in the film, and even if, you know, you feel your part was cut down, to ask. Sometimes you can even just ask for the raw material and, you know, create a reel yourself.
But you should ask before the film is done. You know, that's
Before
why,
the film is done, you
Yeah.
might have to wait to
When the
receive
editing
it.
room's open.
Yes.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
That way we could still help you, you know, or, yeah, that's the only way to do it.
Yeah, I've done that many times for actors, you know, that it's always with the producer and director's blessing. I've also had other directors come into the editing room at their request to see an actor in a scene because they were thinking of casting them in something. And it's you know, nobody tries to, you know, frustrate you. You know, if you ask nicely, chances are that, you know, that people will accommodate you.
Did you want to clarify?
Well, I think, so you just said there might be a window of opportunity once the film is done, that it's too late, or is it still worth trying? Just repeat the questions. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, she asked if it's you know, waiting, the timing of the question to ask for the footage is during the filming process, or at least right after the shoot. Sometimes you don't know if you're cut out, but I mean, if you're an aspiring actor, it never hurts to ask right when a shoot is done, because the editing room is open 6, 7, 8 months, you know, to continue post-production, and just to keep needling to the ear of the producer. And you have to go to the producer and director. You can't go bypass them, because we can't just give out footage. So usually if you plant the seed and they say, yes, we can do this, but you have to wait to receive the footage, at least the editor or the assistant editor in this case could call the footage for you and give it to you. You know,
Yeah,
at
and the
appropriate
reason
time.
you need to ask while the editing room is still open, once the editing room is closed, all the drives are wiped in many cases, and there are records, and it's not easy to get back in and open up cut material.
And sometimes, you know, when they release the DVD, there will be a section of scenes that were taken. Pardon me?
My fingers are crossed.
Oh, okay.
Deleted scenes on your
Deleted
DVD
scenes,
bonus feature will be your saving grace, perhaps. Here's a question about CGI and the actor's performance. This is for people who've worked on special effects films. I assume this is from Matthew. Matthew? There's Matthew. I assume money determines the what and how, but does CGI force re-edits? Are final edits made first? How does this work? And any advice for actors to better the process for people that are in CGI films? Is there any do's and don'ts, things like that, for actors that are in, say, Transformers or something like that?
Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes?
I mean, my brother is an editor as well. He's working on the latest Planet of the Apes. And that is a specific performance because the actors are acting like apes, right? And their voices are altered to sound more apish. And I don't know, I mean, I think that it's still the same rules apply, even if you are doing a CGI picture, because they have these mocapes now, you know, shooting your face, the emotions, what's going on in your eyes. And if it's like, you know, my brother Bill said, you couldn't have done the last 3 Planet of the Apes without Andy Serkis's eyes, because that's the expression you get. And then you put all this other stuff in, you can't fake the eyes. But George Lucas, I mean, there are a lot of editors that do this, is that they'd like a take, or the director will like a take, the movement of the take, you know, but they don't like what's going on in the eyes, and then take it from another take and they stick it in the take that they like. So I think that all that kind of stuff, your brain picks up that something's not quite right, you know, about it. But to answer your question, I think all the rules apply. I mean, Avatar, those actors still had to act.
Yeah, you just give your best performance. There's a wonderful piece of film on the extended DVD of The Lord of the Rings where Andy Serkis is doing, in The Two Towers, he's doing the scene on the rocks where Gollum is talking to himself, and he's acting the entire thing seamlessly. And even without the CGI of Gollum, the whole performance is there. It's breathtaking to see.
Okay. Well, here's another question from Jason. If Jason's out there. This is sort of more about the editor-director relationship. How do you develop a second-hand form of communication with the director to effectively get his or her vision across in your work? Does anyone have a comment on that?
I think you do a lot of talking. You know, there are times when people walk by my office and I'm talking to the director. If it's a producer, they think we're not doing anything, you know. But that's where we do a lot of the work. It's just sitting and you're talking about the inner workings of that character. And I think Dee Dee Allen mentioned this, because you become that character as an actor, as an editor. And so a lot of it is talking. I mean, if I get a scene and I'm not quite sure which direction he's going, because there's a lot of different takes and a variety of performances, I'll call my director and say, look, you know, how do you feel about this? And that's where I get my guidance from.
A shorthand with the director really comes if you've worked with that person before. It's very difficult. I'm working with a director he's Danish. This is his first Hollywood movie. And we get along fine, but they were shooting in Montenegro. I was editing here. And during the shoot, it's very time consuming, and a director is attacked from so many different angles and has to juggle so many things. So we haven't developed that communication yet, but it's something that you just have to be with that person in person and talk and have that rapport and really understand each other. But it really is incumbent upon the editor to try to elicit the intent of the director, whatever his or her desire is for the scope of the film.
I might add that I think, because I've been an old hand at this for a long time, we're kind of in the era of fast food films. I think we need to go step back a little bit and get into the sort of slow cuisine.
Agreed.
Where it's not the amount of footage or the number of takes, it's how well each one of them is done. And just to keep shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting, I think is really starting to hurt movies tremendously. And just because we can handle a lot of things in post-production that we didn't used to have the facility to do, doesn't mean that it's great. Sorry to say. All those buttons on the Avid, I mean, I'll teach once in a while, and I'll tell the students that I'm working with, I'm going to ask you to do one thing. You're only going to go forwards and backwards and cut. I don't want you to touch any buttons. I don't want any moving of the image or this or that. I just want you to just think about what you're doing, just with the simplest tools. And then you can put all the embellishments on. And I think acting is probably the same way. Just deal with the basics. And once you get that, you've got the heart of it. And then you can start putting the embellishments on. I kind of like slow cinema myself.
Okay, I guess we're getting close to wrapping up. I'm going to add one last question of my own that we didn't get to. I know from my own experiences this was helpful as an editor and in filmmaking. Do you think it would be helpful for actors to shoot and edit their own films? And Does anyone want to comment on that in terms of the lessons that can be? I mean, John and I are both film school buddies,
You'll
so
be
we
a
know
screaming Mimi in no
those
time.
lessons.
I mean, put it this way, when we were at USC, we as filmmakers had to take acting classes, which is a very smart thing to do because, I mean, this was really intended for directors, but in order to be a good director, I think you have to see the point of view of an actor. And I've seen directors give terrific direction to actors and directors give terrible direction to actors. And you know, it's understanding the subtext and communicating the subtext and not saying, okay, I want you to do it bigger or slower. You know, it's really understanding the actor and the craft of acting. So on the flip side, I think to improve your craft as actors, yes, you should star in your own film and then edit it. You know, software is very easy. I mean, you could, I work with Chris Evans. He directed a film called Before We Go, and it was his first directing effort, and he was also starring in it. And it was really kind of cute because he would take the dailies and cut them in iMovie. And you would do it every day before he would show up to work with me before we worked on the scene. And it was the most fantastic thing ever. It wasn't so much that he was doing it for his own performance, it was he was doing it as a director to understand the footage that he had. And I wish more directors would do that instead of saying, well, how come you can't make this work? But yeah, I mean, you can easily do short films and edit them and develop an understanding of yourself as an actor and things that are working and not working.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that, or?
I've worked with many actors who have become directors, and it's one of the hardest things in the world to do, to direct yourself. When I was working with Danny DeVito, he used to sit in the editing room and talk to himself on screen and say, "Why are you doing that? That's the worst performance I've ever seen. Cut that out of there." And there is, I mean, a lot of actors have become wonderful, wonderful directors. And there's a lot to learn on, you know, on both sides of the thing. And it would give you a real appreciation of how difficult it is to direct and edit. Because most actors don't ever come into contact with that at all.
Okay. Did you want to weigh in on that, Maysie? Or?
When Tyler Perry is doing these three characters, I would go visit him on the set like the first week, and he trusted me to give him feedback as to whether it was working or not, or how he looked, you know. And so I think the other thing you have to find is somebody you trust. It's going to tell you the truth. It's like, okay, you know what, you may have thought that scene was really great and you're chewing up the furniture, but the person that has, you know, no agenda with your acting, but just as an audience, is going to tell you, you know, I think you need to pull it back. But I think directors should also edit their own projects, because then they know how, you know, to block, what not to do. And I think that, you know, any kind of experience you get behind the camera, and I think it'll help your own performance.
Carol, did you want to weigh in on this, or?
Yeah, I think absolutely. There's just no substitute for doing it, you know. So I would give it a try.
Well, I think you're also going to understand the whole post-production process. It doesn't just end, you know, when we finish our cut. There's a whole sound thing that we do. There's a music session, and then the final mix, and it'll be real interesting to see how sometimes your performance is embellished by sound and music. So those are other things that, I mean, you don't have to think about that, but that's what we think about in the final product.
You should ask people, filmmaker friends of yours, if you could sit in their cutting room. A lot of times it's considered unorthodox for an actor in a film to sit in the cutting room while their performance is being edited. I mean, a lot of times directors, there's this whole DGA thing. The director gets 10 weeks before they show it to the producers. So, I mean, things are very protective. So you'll have more success if you can get in on a low-budget film that someone else is doing and see what the editor is doing to work performances and make the most of the material.
Okay, well, that's it for our panel tonight. Thank you all for joining us. I hope you've enjoyed this discussion about editors on acting and feature films.
The most important thing is don't suck.